Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. So look, man, all of these champions you're seeing here in this image, they're all at risk. It's already happened to one of them, of being stripped of one, if not all, of their titles. And this includes Charlo, who recently became undisputed champion of the 154-pound division. Now, you're probably saying, well, how do you arrive at that conclusion? Because people, recently, Josh Taylor, right? And this isn't a precedent being set. This is something that's been happening for years, okay? Josh Taylor is undisputed, okay? Champion, 140 pounds. Now, he had, so many different mandatories. So he went out there and fought the mandatory for the WBO. There was an agreement among sanctioning bodies for the WBC to get an opportunity for their mandatory to fight Taylor after Taylor if he was able to get beyond his WBO mandatory, which he did. But the WBA went against the agreement and forced Taylor into a no-win situation where he would have been stripped of his WBA title and forced a purse bid between him and the mandatory for the WBA, which as a result, there was no one else to compete in the purse bid. So the WBA, they won the purse bid for $200,000. And Taylor was like, no, I'm not taking that money because I've been making millions. As a result, the WBA got stripped him of that belt. And now they have the belt. They can do what they want and put the fights on they want and make the money they want. And Taylor has now gone from being undisputed to just a unified champion. And this is the thing, right? This has been happening for ages. It's happened to Lennox Lewis. It's happened to Evander Holyfield. It's happened to other fighters before them as well. When fighters get stripped for not agreeing to fight, these sanctioning bodies, number one. And if you're a unified champion, or you're especially an undisputed champion, and you don't have common mandatories across all sanctioning bodies, it's near impossible. And then you have situations like with Evander Holyfield. He was supposed to fight the WBA. I'll tell you exactly what, because this is the stuff that is just really, really unfortunate. So Lennox Lewis became the undisputed champion by defeating Evander Holyfield, successfully unifying his WBC belt with Holyfield's WBA and IBF belts. Remember, this is the 3-belt era. With that victory, he was also awarded the vacant IBO title, which means nothing. Lewis was stripped of his WBA belt. So now Lewis was stripped of his WBA belt that he won from Holyfield due to a contract dispute regarding a clause in the second Holyfield contract, which stipulated he must fight the WBA number one contender next. The number one contender at that time was Henry Akinwande, but he was ill, so John Ruiz was later moved up to number one. The WBA gave Lewis permission under these circumstances to fight the WBC ranked contender Michael Grant next, as long as he agreed to fight Ruiz in the following bout. Lewis agreed, but Ruiz promoted challenged WBA's decision in court. So you have a situation where the number one for the WBA that Lewis was supposed to fight was ill. So they agreed to allow him to go on and fight another fight. And the guy who was moved up, John Ruiz, to the number one position, doesn't like it. They go to court, and now they strip Lewis of his WBA belt. Horrible. Okay? So my thing is this. At what point do these sanctioning bodies, stop and say, okay, we need to sort this out immediately? It sounds like they attempted to do that before, but that didn't work out because there was supposed to be an honor agreement. Now, an honor agreement to me is all bullshit. These guys do business together. These organizations, these sanctioning bodies, we're talking millions of dollars, flowing through these guys' hands. Millions of dollars flowing through their businesses. If if you have some kind of agreement, an express contract is the most difficult contract to prove. It is binding, but it is extremely difficult to prove. So an honor contract and an express contract is the same thing. You can't prove it, and nobody needs to uphold their end of the agreement, because obviously they felt different about it. But ultimately, who's the person who suffers? It's the boxer, and that's unfortunate, because I always say those belts, that's leverage. Those belts mean more money in your purse. So when the WBA or WBC or one of these other sanctioning bodies come and decide, you know what? Although you have, let's say, 2 or 3 belts, or even all 4, and each of us have a mandatory, we know you can't possibly fight 2 fights within 60 days of each other, or whatever. They sit back, they have a conversation, they can't come to an agreement. Now, one sanctioned body feels that their fighter should get the fight first, the other fighter feels their mandatory should get the fight before the other one. Now they both start this big back and forth, and then they decide to be stubborn, put the pressure on the fighter to make a decision. He can't. Now they go and they strip him. And there's just so many other scenarios where you've seen this stuff happening. But if you look at what's going on right now, I really think with what happened with Josh Taylor and how they stripped him of his belt, I think they're setting a precedence, because this is like the season, man, like of the unifications, like of undisputed distinctions. And I think the WBA sat back and looked at that and said, you know what? Why in the world will we pigeonhole ourselves? Because we're about to miss out on some serious opportunities here. And at the end of the day, these fighters are nothing but tools, man. When you need to get something done, or you just decide which tool you're going to take out the box and use it for whatever you want. At the end of the day, they're tools to these sanctioning bodies and organizations just to generate money. And I think it sucks that you have to pay somebody, a large amount of money just to be their champion. I get it. It's a business. I get it. But I just think that it sucks that some of these guys have to pay, 3%, 10%, 15%. And it varies, but such, large portions of their purse just to have that title. $300,000 is a lot of money to give up just to be the champion. $30,000 is a lot of money. And I said in another video, that's why Floyd Mayweather's like, nah, you can keep those belts. He already knows that he's the man in the division. Everybody knows it was impossible to beat him. So what did he need the belts for? He had been there and done that. But it's a lot of money out of your purse just to give to an organization, just to say, okay, look at me, look at this little trinket I have. Especially when you can go out there and win these belts, and they can do what they're doing right now. So Josh Taylor was one. It looks like Charlo's Jamel's about to get some pressure, because his mandatory's out there. He has all the belts, and that's where hopefully he has the right team where they can stop and have conversations and prevent these sanctioning bodies from even putting the kind of unfair pressure on him to where now he loses his belts. But it sounds to me like he's about to move up to 160 anyway and relinquish all the belts. And I hope he does that before he has to pay any of those fees. Been there, done that, check the box, move on. He'll go up to 160. His brother will go to 168. But, Usyk could be the next one. Katie Taylor, you got Carissa Shields and Savannah Marshall coming up. So I just think with these undisputed and unified champions, that it's really, really unfortunate this stuff is happening. Here's another one, man. It's just bullying. If you don't agree to face a mandatory challenger, or if you refuse to, it's the only thing if you have one belt. If you have one belt and you refuse to face that mandatory, you should be stripped. Okay? You have one belt. But if you have 2 belts, they should be able to give some flexibility. Okay, which one are you going to defend first? The WBC or WBA? Okay, do the WBC. If you win that one, you go defend the WBA. But when you have one belt and you don't want to fight, you should be stripped. A lot of guys would rather be stripped than go out there and run the risk of taking the L. But when you have 2, 3, 4 belts, I mean, to me, it seems like a no-brainer. Like, what are we even talking about? But then again, I'm not the expert on this issue. I'm just a guy here viewing this from a damn desk in his house. So I don't know. Maybe you guys know more about this than me. I just think that if they're doing it to Joshua, it's been going on for years. I understand if it's one belt. I really do. One belt makes sense. You got a mandatory, get it out the way. But when you have all these, it just doesn't make sense to me how they can get away with that. Get away with that. And especially to do something like you say, you know what? We know this person is supposed to be defending this other, like say a WBC belt, but we want them to defend the WBA. So we know they're already in negotiations on that. So we're going to force this down their throat. That's going to cause them to break luck with those negotiations, which they're probably not going to do. But since they haven't cemented anything yet, they're still in talks. We're going to put pressure on them here. And if they can't sort things out by the deadline we impose on them, and they don't get their legal team in place, well, then now we're going to go to purse bid. And we're probably the only ones bidding on it. And now it's going to be the purse bid we're going to win is going to be so low that they're going to relinquish the belt and we get what we want anyway. So that should be illegal to me. But then again, I talk about loopholes in contracts and finding a way to win. And, and it's not the sanctioning body's fault if they're able to exploit these weak areas in the black and white. But it sucks because the fighters, unfortunately, are the ones who have to deal with the BS, man. But it is what it is, man. But Jamel, Katie Taylor, everyone else, I just think there's gonna be more issues until they figure it out. And it sounds to me like Suleiman from the WBC, he's the only one who's really trying to put an end to this nonsense because he knows it's unfair. He knows it's wrong. But at the same time, he at least he's addressing it. He's championed this effort and campaign to fix this. But 1 against 3. I mean, how far is he really going to get? That's the thing. How far is he really going to get being by himself trying to resolve this? Because you see, Earl Spence and Terrence Crawford are happening this year now. You got to look at that as well. And could you imagine, like right now, if let's say the WBA came right now and tried to push a mandatory standing units on Earl Spence, knowing that Earl Spence is probably 80% done with negotiation with Terrence Crawford, push a mandatory defense on him because they can, and say, nope, you either fight standing units or we strip you, or we're gonna go to purse bid for you and standing units since you can't agree on a fight with him because you're focusing on over here. They could do that. There's nothing stopping them. What message would they be sending? They did it to Josh Taylor. They could put Earl Spence in a horrible position. What's Earl Spence gonna do? This man's supposed to be making. This man's gonna probably make. I'm assuming now. 20 to 30 million to fight Crawford. That's just what I'm assuming. And then you want him to come now and force and Stan Eunice. I think Stan Eunice has a good chance if he was a fight. But I'm just saying. I'm talking about just forcing mandatories down people and say, no, you come fight Stan Eunice for maybe $1 million or whatever they win in the purse bid. What do you think Earl Spence is going to do? He's going to have to give that belt up. And then now him and Crawford are just fighting for another unified distinction. And that's foul. So this is why they need to get control over this to stop this stuff from happening. In my opinion, there should be undisputed championships. Like that should be the goal. Almost like have brackets. Everyone with belts fight around robin until you get to the end. You have one person standing. You have the undisputed distinction, and then you have common mandatories, and then you just start rolling. And all the guys who aren't in mandatory positions, they're fighting, trying to get themselves to a mandatory position. So we always have one undisputed champion. That really is what it should be. One face, one name, like Deontay Wilder says. And I think he's right about that. And I think Suleiman's right with what he's trying to do. But again, man, who knows what goes on in these rooms. We know that boxing's been around for a while. We know there's corruption. We know it's all about money. And the guys making the real money aren't the ones getting punched in the face. And that's what sucks about it. But, it is what it is. But anyway, man, if you've been hanging around this long, man, like and subscribe. Leave your thoughts on how you think they can resolve this. Leave your thoughts on your opinion on why this stuff happens. How do you think we can resolve it? Also, if you can shed light on other examples of this stuff happening. I went and did some research, man. There's a whole, I don't even want to go through the laundry list, but there's so many instances of guys not wanting to defend against the mandatory. With one belt, you understand, but there's guys who are unified and run into issues with mandatories or some clause from someone else's contract that they go and fight them and win that belt that really that person should have defended against someone else. Now they go to court and the person who fought that person and won the belt has it stripped from them because of some crap that his opponent didn't handle, And it's just crazy. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and leave it as that. You guys keep safe. Appreciate the support. Like and subscribe. And as always, I'm in the breeze.